Welcome to Insights and Inspiration. I'm Andrew Marlowe.
I'm Monica Marlowe.
And tonight we are joined by Bruce Cordell of Monte Games. Great to have you here, Bruce.
Hi, Bruce.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, you guys.
So I know most of our audience is aware of who you are and what it is that you do in the gaming community, but for those who might not, can you briefly introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Sure, happy to. I'm a longtime designer of RPGs, actually since 1995. Well, before that, I was doing it freelance a couple of years before that. So starting in 92, I was a freelance writer, and then I've pretty much been doing it full-time since 95. Also during that time, I've dabbled in novels. I have had 10 novels published.
That's not dabbling.
Yeah, I was going to say, that doesn't sound like dabbling. That sounds like you're a novelist.
Well, I guess, I understand what you're saying, and thank you. Although if I were doing novels full-time, then it wouldn't be dabbling. All right, not dabbling. I'm also doing novels, but not full-time. How's that?
There you go.
So before we get to, because the big thing is, obviously, we have our copy of The Stars Are Fire, because we were Kickstarter backers.
Oh, look, we're twins!
Before we get to the new release, I thought we would go back into the Wayback Machine for just a moment, because when we told some of our Pathfinder friends that we were going to be on with you, the immediate response was, "Oh, Bruce did the Return to the Tomb of Horrors." So real quick, what was it like to work on such a sort of, well, you worked on like 4 or 5 editions of D&D, is that right?
4 of the 5 I've actually got publication credit in. So yes, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. I mean, I guess if you consider 3.5 a separate edition, then 5, but yeah, it's kind of a gradation there.
Yeah, it was. I always consider it sort of like 3 era. Yeah, it's all one edition. It was like a giant book of errata.
Yeah, and in some cases maybe not necessary errata, just let's make it slightly more complex. But yeah, 2nd edition was the era of Return to the Tomb of Horrors, and the 2nd edition was when you go from edition to edition, at least from 2nd to 3rd to 3.5 to 4, you have a loose, very loose, easy to design in space to more and more constricted and formalized design rule space. So Return to the Tomb of Horrors was in that initial space, and it was a delight to design for.
That's cool. So we were wondering, I mean, that is, the Tomb of Horrors is a legend. Was it stressful to step in and do something that was so storied?
Recognizable.
It was stressful, but it was mainly just super exciting, right? Because I, as a D&D fan from first edition era, having both played in and GM'd Tomb of Horrors itself many times, was just so excited to actually get my chance to expand the story. And I don't think probably would have been more stressful in the modern era of scrutiny from social media, but that was right when AOL was pretty darn new and most people weren't online, and the user boards were where you went to get stuff, and there's some AOL boards as well, but yeah, it wasn't stressful in that sense. So I was able to just kind of dive in. They actually had a thing back at TSR in the day where you could have a full-time job there, but you could also get additional freelance if you wanted to take extra time. And that was fine because the design cycles were a lot looser back then. You were expected to write less in a day. And so I actually had my regular, I don't know how many months, to write that. Plus I had like freelance to write it too. So I was just working on it all the time, but that was great. I enjoyed it.
You said something and I'm just curious now. Do you find yourself, when you're GMing a game, do you find yourself more loosely telling the story and doing more off the cuff and, ad-libbing at the table, or do you find yourself having very structured outline of what your game is going to be like? Because I know MCG as a whole does both. There was the instant adventures and all these other things. What would you describe your actual GMing style to be then?
Well, like you're saying, it lies along a continuum in any particular encounter. I like to start though from a structure. I like to begin from some really solid, statistics, ideas where I'm going to go, some components. But then I'm happy to, if I see something that strikes my fancy or someone does something that's really interesting, at this point in my career, I guess, as a GM, let's call it my GMing career, I'm confident enough to kind of go with that and make something interesting happen. Certainly, 10 years, 20 years, however long it's been, 30, longer ago, I would have been much more, let's just stick to the, I don't know. I guess I believe that's the case, although I do remember, like, even in high school, my friends starting to burn down an inn, and I'm like, all right, this is where this campaign's going, and I just ran with it. So even though I like structure, I guess I'm okay with just going off book and going wherever the game leads.
Well, that now begs the question, was Monte part of that crew?
Yes, he was.
It's funny to know that you and Monte have been friends for so long, and we have a similar group where we've gamed with them for so long as well. And when we look back on what gaming is like now and what gaming was like back then, it's sort of like, wow, were we really like that?
So let's talk the Stars Are Fire.
Okay, let's do that.
So again, I was so excited to get this thing. To be honest, I was checking my our coupons page, not quite daily after you posted your picture, but I have a fondness for sci-fi.
Yay.
So, and particularly hard sci-fi. And I was just, with like everybody else, I was just discovering The Expanse about the time you guys were announcing what you were going to be doing. And so I was like, ooh. Yay.
So I actually...
There was
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask...
Nope.
I noticed that you actually also have a degree in biology. And I was wondering if that led you to any kind of, like, did that fuel some of your hard science choices as just a game designer overall? Because you do seem to have a lot more science in your design realm.
Going back, sure. I think that it's had an effect on me overall, and mainly what's the ecosystem like, right? That sort of thing. As far as my language has had to be kind of brought back into standard lexicon, I guess I would say, because when I first got to TSR, I think that I tended to be a little bit more technical than was probably good, and simpler sentences are better for clarity. So a lot of, I don't know, I think I had some bad habits. And maybe that was from Gary Gygax too, right? I mean, who knows, right? Reading the original DMG is certainly not a simple sentence construction. But I guess, overall, I've liked science. There was part of me that really was like, should I really leave science? Because I was working in the biopharmaceutical industry, doing research, when I got the offer to work full time at TSR, and it was a big change in my life, and I really wondered if I should do it, and I'm glad I did. Obviously I never have gone back.
We are glad you did too.
I've always appreciated science, and so this is the first. When I wrote the Expanded Worlds, which is an expansion of the original CSR, there was a small hard science fiction section. So that was the first time I was able to be like, all right, hard science fiction. But that was kind of a preview to a promise that this actually was fulfilled, right? I mean, I was really able to go into so much depth on the hard science and as well as contemporary and fantastic science, right? I tried to create a rule book, a resource for science fiction writers that would allow them to go at whatever level they wanted, or at all the levels if they just don't care. They're like, it's all science fiction to me, right? I tried to create a format that would allow them to do that.
Right. So you can do the Expanse level hard sci-fi. You can do the Star Trek that's kind of both the fantastical and the hard, and then you can go right all the way over into Star Wars with this thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. So what I did essentially was science fiction is a lot about your stuff, certainly more than a lot of other things. And so I created these 2 large chapters, which are essentially equipment and armaments and vehicles and spacecraft. And every single item in that list within its category falls with either contemporary, advanced, which is pretty much hard science fiction, and fantastic, which is Star Wars. And you can have elements of that. You can stick within your element and just pull from one if you want to tell a contemporary story that has aliens are coming to your planet. You can stick in hard science fiction and have some one weird thing that seems outside of the realm, which is the Expanse, essentially. Mm-hmm. You could just tell Star Wars or Star Trek and go all the way to advanced. And that was really exciting to me, and I was really happy when it all seemed to work out. And then another thing, using that same system, I have kind of advanced vehicle combat rules, which will allow you to take basically your basic vehicles, if you want, and have them fight science fiction vehicles either at the advanced or the fantastic level, or any vice versa. You could have like some old ancient hard science fiction vehicles, like a fleet of those, and have them fight a more advanced spacecraft. Excuse me, a fantastic spacecraft. So we did some playtesting with that, and that was all really great. I'd actually talked to Eric Campbell and Sam DeLev, who were in the Shields of Tomorrow stream from back, and also Callisto 6 later. They were writing and running that, and they were kind of telling me their problems and their issues with space combat and the things that frustrated them. And that out of that conversation, kind of like, well, what can we? I was like, I was trying to come up with ways that I could actually make it important what you do. So you don't just say, well, I shoot again this round, right? I shoot again this round. I'm sitting at the weapon station. There's things for everyone to do, and there's important things, and you can make different decisions when you're in your space combat.
I wish I had that about 3 weeks ago for ship combat in general.
Yeah, I do really like the new vehicle rules. Those will be making an appearance in other genres as well, because I think that they will be easily adapted, and the sort of gradients of things you can do was greatly appreciated, and the fact that everybody on a vehicle has something they can contribute.
So. Yeah, the red line mechanic that I came up with for doing something crazy, we almost went back because the newer CSR had not yet gone to print, and we almost kind of said, should we just put that rule in as a general rule? We decided to keep it here for just for the science, the vehicle, and especially the science fiction vehicle combat. But I don't know. I think if we'd had more time, we might have brought it into the regular CSR as well. Who knows?
Well, the red line rule is very clever, and for those who are listening who don't know, do you want to explain what that is briefly?
Just basically overall, and I give specific examples under each type of station you can command on a spacecraft, is that you can decide to make a crazy gamble. And when you decide to make that crazy gamble, you basically decrease the difficulty of whatever task you're trying to do by a certain number of steps, which is great, right? But meanwhile, you're also increasing, if you're familiar with the Cypher system, the GM excuse me, the GM intrusion range from its normal one, right, by a couple steps each time. So if you got even one person in the during that particular round trying a red line maneuver, just trying to really amp it up, they could really succeed or fail spectacularly. And if you have a couple of people doing it, it all contributes to the overall GM intrusion for that particular round. So it's pretty fun.
Yeah, I really like that. I actually like the fact that with a couple of the supplements you've done now, I mean, you not MCGU, where that is something that has been played with. It showed up in the original CSR with the horror mechanics, and now we have it in Starfighter and space mechanics, where that GM intrusion range adjusts to up the drama on things that are dramatic. So I think it's a really neat design space.
So I confess I'm not really the person who does a lot of the book reading because I am the gamer. I'm the player. I enjoy GMing, but I don't actually like doing it on a regular basis. But one of the things I've really enjoyed, especially, is the amount of guidance that all of the MCG books are, have been increasingly putting in their books, like your table of GM intrusions, like each of your subgenres. You even have like short blurbs about like what this planet or what this setting might look like, whether it's sort of a horror. I can't even off the top of my head think of, but you had like, if you have evil AIs and things like that. It was neat to be able to say, oh, like the thought that went into just concisely giving an idea of what these things look like really helps to like bring hooks to other ideas for character creation in that. And I just wanted to say that I really appreciated that, because I'm terrible about coming up with stuff like that on my own sometimes.
Well, we all can use some inspiration, and whether if you feel you're good or bad at it, anyone can appreciate it, and we realize that too, and we have the advantage of spending a couple hours to come up with one of these tables, right? And you can really kind of sit down and really fill something out, which could be for someone running game, look down and be like, oh, great, right? So going back to the red line thing, for instance, I actually have a table of potential. Actually, I have a lot of GM intrusions in the Stars Are Fire, from like things that can go wrong with your spacesuit to like things that can go wrong with your airlock, and things that can go wrong when someone's doing a red line maneuver with the weapon system, right? or the drive. So yeah, it's thank you. I'm glad you appreciate it, and we like to do it as well for the same reason.
One of the other really quick things I really appreciated was, and it's sort of like that scientist to scientist kind of thing, when you described what a body feels like for the first time in 0G, what it feels like to be sucked out, to be thrust through space at, high velocity and stuff like that. A lot of times we don't really deeply consider how the human body gets pushed to its limits, and what those limits really look like or feel like, and like that whole blacking out, or like being unable to take a breath because there is no breath to have. And it was neat to have those descriptions, especially for people who might not really have the ability to conceive what that feels like at all, and to have that as like a baseline for what the real science looks like.
And thank you. And I did try and go and find firsthand descriptions of people who have gone through these particular types of experiences to feel how they would describe how they felt when they were accelerating or blacking out or losing oxygen, right? Being exposed to vacuum. There's not too much on that, so we had to do some extrapolation, but yeah. So, sadly, there's research on dogs who were exposed to vacuum. On the other hand, they were all fine afterwards, so I guess yay.
Yeah.
Except I guess, the ones that were down on Earth anyway. Not the first dog into space, sadly.
Right.
Yeah.
So, before we get too far off course, I know you've got a hard time limit here tonight. So, Stars Are Fire is not the only project you have in the works at the moment. You just launched a Patreon.
Oh, thank you for mentioning that. I appreciate it. I did. I think I was saying at the beginning of this that maybe I'm not dabbling, but I am writing novels part-time. And when I was working at Wizards, I was in a very lucky position because I had a novel writing department. And after many years of harassing them, they finally gave me a test novel, which I wrote under a different name, which was T.H. Lane. And then after that, they started giving me actual novels with deadlines. And I am a superb writer when I'm given a deadline by, someone who needs something from me and expecting to pay me or whatever, or I'll get in trouble, right? Whatever. Deadlines are good. And I've written 10 novels with deadlines, but now it's been 3 or 4 years since I guess I wrote Myth of the Maker, but I did end up getting a deadline before I finally finished that. And now I've written 0 novels without a deadline, and I've started 2, and I'm going slowly. And I figured, you know what, a Patreon would be perfect. That would give me the impetus of having people who are supporting me, and I can't let them down. And people who are interested in what I'm doing, or just want to support me, or maybe get some insights. I have things for them as well, or special thanks. Right? There's a level for that as well. I also created just threw it out there, an RPG consultant level, which is kind of the super high. You only do this if you really want to, want to get some serious insight back on you, and probably if you have you're super rich or something as well. But
or serious,
or really serious. I have one taker already, so
yeah, I was gonna say you did have somebody on that one already.
Well, and at a bargain $3 a month, being able to see your raw your chapters as you finish them, I was like, well, this is something that I could be very interested in.
I'm dropping the first chapter tomorrow.
Well, then I guess I'm going to start backing.
They actually say I shouldn't do before I actually, every month I don't know, I'm very new to Patreon. They said let the rewards actually roll through once before you start giving off. But first chapter, whatever. So I'm going to drop the first chapter tomorrow that I finished. So.
And I to be honest, I think those rules are meant to be broken, and I think certain, you can certainly start dropping rewards whenever you feel comfortable with it, and
we certainly did.
Do you guys have a Patreon?
We do. We do blogs.
Oh, tell me more.
We do blogs weekly.
Well, sort of
weekly. We were trying. That is our goal. Sometimes it doesn't quite happen, but we do a little bit of sometimes behind the scenes stuff.
This show is part of it.
Yeah, this show is part of our Patreon.
The show and the Friday show. Most of what we try to do it so that ours is set up so that most of what we do is patrons supporting us, putting things out into the world for free.
Right. So we do all of our videos and that are public, but we do sometimes do little short behind the scenes and stuff like that go up to just our backers.
That makes sense. Yeah, I listen. I support a couple podcasts that do that. Right? It's for all free material, but if you want to support us, so I do that.
And we do.
Sign.
And we just did a game for 4 of our patrons who had backed us at
it was a surprise. It was actually a surprise to them. We were like, we've had these handful of backers who've been with us for a long time, and they've backed us very generously. So we got together on a Saturday afternoon and we ran a game with them, and it was a lot of fun.
Actually, I ran them through something inspired by the Jade Colossus.
Yep.
Because
and I'm in Studio Jade or Studio Colossus.
Right. So
all come together.
I actually have that in hand for a reason. Because one of our plans is our project, as we're looking to do a podcast, an audio only podcast, and we're going to try to run Numenera, and it's based in the Jade Colossus.
I like the sound of that.
So, and that's partly because I want to say it was the guys from Cypher Unlimited.
Yeah, someone wanted to see it.
Who posted up, and they said, what do you think we could see in more podcasts? And Grant Ellis from WebDM was like, I'd like to see a
Jade
Jade
Colossus
Colossus game. And I was like, well, funny, that's on my list. And so I moved it up my list and talked to all the players that are going to be involved in it, and that's where we're going to go. We're going to try a Jade Colossus game.
And if it goes well, we'll let you know. we'll drop you a line to it.
And just be silent if there's no. I'm sure it'll go great. Good luck.
Yeah. Well, the neat thing about Jade Colossus, I mean, not to go too far off, but I mean, it's still talking Bruce Cordell stuff. Jade Colossus, one of the neat things about it is such a toolbox rather than a straight up adventure. I mean, it's presented as an adventure, but it is, it's like a collection of bits and it's like finding Numenera. You've got all these bits and bobs, and when you put it together, it can be something entirely different. It's like
the last 40 pages. The last 40 pages are a toolbox, right? It's the rune mapping engine. Create any weird encounter location you can imagine.
I don't disagree, but I would say that it's even more than that, because you've got the town, and then in the town there are all these hooks. There are hooks for the player characters. There are hooks for the town. There are hooks for stories. There are all these questions raised of what is the Jade Colossus. None of them are answered, but there are suggested answers.
Just like a Numenera story.
And there's like all these pieces. Every chapter has bits and bobs that you can assemble. And so no two Jade Colossus campaigns are going to be the same. There may be some story elements because they're instant adventures format. You've got the instant adventures format encounter areas, kind of like bits that you can explore, but even at that rate, because they're the instant adventures format, those won't even be run the same. Mm-hmm. So I'm super excited to get into that as well. We love Numenera.
That's what we usually run on Fridays, is a cipher setting of some kind.
Usually it's something completely ours, so this will actually be a little different for us because we haven't burned any buildings down yet. No.
Not for lack of trying, though.
Not for lack of trying. Because we've done a lot of weird things. We kind of throw settings and things in the blender and see what we get.
Okay, so it's 9:30. Yep. So before you leave, Bruce, is there anything you feel like we should really know about that you really are proud of in The Stars Are Fire?
In The Stars Are Fire. Well, I was able to write a setting of my own, which is probably a third, maybe a fourth of the book. It's a chunky piece, but it's not the main part of the book. But I'm really happy with the setting. I'm happy with the science fiction, the hard science fiction element that kind of goes behind the mystery of why the Earth suddenly went dark, and how that's kind of tied in with some other technological elements of the setting. And of course, then it's that's not. A lot of people, when they play it, if they play in it, there won't be like that will probably ultimately be what they try and figure out. I don't know. Or you can just grab it and use it in your own science fiction setting and say, this is a weird thing that we could use. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. So if you're looking into The Stars Are Fire, check out the setting as well. I'm sure you will. It's called The Revel.
Now you acted like you had a different answer for something else. What's the other thing?
Oh, well, if you hadn't already brought up my Patreon, I would have said, hey, by the way, folks, I'm really excited about my Patreon. Please check it out. Bruce Cordell at Patreon, right?
Actually, you mentioned it briefly, and I looked at your Patreon, but now I can't remember what they were called. You've got
co-conspirator.
Well, no, I was going to say you've got 2 novels on there. You've got a fantasy and a science fiction. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, a fantasy novel and a science fiction / superhero novel.
Ooh, well, cool.
So that's what's coming on the Patreon. So if people are interested in either one of those genres, it'd be definitely worth taking a look at the Patreon.
That's right, and as Monica's saying, I have three levels, which I thought it would be kind of fun to name them interestingly. So for $1 a month, you're my accomplice. And then for $3 a month to get to see the chapters, you're my collaborator. And if you want thanks in the back of the book, then you're a co-conspirator.
I thought that was pretty clever.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, thank you.
Well, have a very good Thanksgiving. We don't want to keep you beyond your time limit.
So we're going to go ahead and go to a quick break. Let you.
And we'll cut you
out.
out, and then we'll come back and talk nonsense for another half an hour. Have a great time.
Thank you very much for coming on, Bruce.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
It was awesome talking to you.
And don't forget, it's coming out. It's on RPG. Will it be like on drive-thru and everything like that very shortly? It's on your website too.
Tomorrow, I think, is the official launch day for The Stars Are Fire.
Okay, so The Stars Are Fire will be available to non-Patreon or to non-Kickstarter backers.
That's right. I think a lot of Kickstarter. Well, obviously
we have ours, but yeah,
Kickstarter backers already should have some of them in hand. So yay!
All right. Well, have a great night.
Have a great night.
Thanks.